Here, I want to cover profitability briefly because this came up again in quite a few of my interviews. So I might have been looking at a case study where they had some kind of fictional client accounts. The client account showed that something was happening with revenue, something was happening with costs, and something was happening with profit over time. And I needed to comment on what that might involve and whether I thought there was some kind of risk or something like that. So it's worth understanding in high-level terms how profit works. So this slide kind of shows you the key factors that influence profitability. Now, on the left-hand side, we've got revenue. Revenue is sometimes referred to as turnover or sales. And what this refers to is the total income generated from a firm's operations within a set period of time. It doesn't take into account costs, but just purely reflects the money that has been received from sales. So if I sell 10 handbooks for £10 each, my revenue is £100, regardless of how much it costs for me to produce each of those handbooks. And that's kind of one side of what affects profit. Generally, if your revenue increases, you would expect your profit to increase. On the other side, you've got costs. Costs reduce your profit. And costs are made up in general of two different types of costs. You've got fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs are business costs that remain the same regardless of how many units you produce or sell. So if you have a factory and you pay rent for that factory or rent for that office, that rent will remain fixed regardless of whether you sell 0 units or you sell 1,000 units. Now, obviously, if you start selling millions of units, you might need to pay for a second factory or a second office and things get a bit more complicated then. But in general, fixed costs are costs that don't change depending on the number of units you sell. I pay a monthly subscription fee for my online store. I pay a monthly subscription fee for my commercial law academy e-learning platform. And if I sell 1 book or I sell 1,000 books, that fee stays the same. It's a fixed cost. You've also got variable costs, and those are costs that change in relation to the number of units you sell. So every time I sell a book, it costs me a certain amount of money to print that book, and I also need to pay a certain commission to Amazon or Stripe or whoever, and that is a variable cost. So the more units I sell, the higher my variable costs are. And your costs are made up of fixed costs plus variable costs. So if you can remember that structure on the slide, you might be in a situation in an interview where they say, well, the company's profit has gone down. What could this mean? You might then have a conversation with the interviewer where you say, well, why has the profit gone down? Is it because revenue has gone down, suggesting customers are less interested in buying the company's products or services? Or has profit gone down because costs have gone up? And your interviewer might then say, oh, actually, it's because costs have gone up. What could that mean? You can look down and go, well, why might costs have increased? Is it because the company has lost control of its costs and its suppliers are all increasing their costs and that's something that's quite difficult to deal with? Or is it because the company has just invested in buying a new factory or new vehicles, whereas the company spent money that will reduce profit in the short term, but actually contribute towards growth and greater profitability in the long term? And if that's the scenario, if you go, well, profit's gone down, but actually I'm not worried about that because profits have gone down because the company is investing in its future, which suggests in a year or 2 years, profits will go up, revenues will go up. You won't have to make that huge investment again into a factory for a while. And that's the kind of high-level analysis you might want to go into if you're looking at profitability in a very, very simple set of financial accounts.